Welcome to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications. We are your source for lobbying, compliance, ethics, campaign finance, and election news from across the country. Hello, this is Elizabeth Bartz, President and CEO of State and Federal Communications. Let me transfer you to Joe May, who will introduce this week's podcast.
I have with me Jean Cantrell. Jean, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what we'll be talking about today?
Thank you, Joe. I'd be happy to take that on. As Joe mentioned, I'm Jean Cantrell, and I am beginning my fourth year of service at State and Federal Communications. And my title is Senior Advisor, which is a pretty big catch-all, but I have to say that the primary part of my job is managing stakeholder relations, which is the topic of our podcast today. And the formal title is Managing Stakeholder Groups, State and Federal Communications Style.
To level set, please describe what you mean by stakeholder management.
Thanks, Joe. I'd be happy to do that because I think it's always important to begin with understanding the terms of what we're going to be talking about. So, what is a stakeholder group? I think that we're talking about organizations that share a common goal or interest. And members of stakeholder groups can be comprised either of individuals or organizations. For example, what comes to mind for me is the National Conference of State Legislatures. These members are state legislatures, either from a state, commonwealth, or territory. And they have the common goal of advancing the effectiveness of legislatures as institutions, among many other things that they do. Women in Government, though, is a membership organization comprised of individual elected officials. And their shared goal is empowering women in their roles as state legislators. So what about managing stakeholder groups? We refer to this because there is a process involved to figure out how or if your organization will engage with a particular group. Engagement in stakeholder groups, I believe, is a cornerstone of an effective GR program. It allows for meaningful collaboration between the GR folk and members of the stakeholder groups.
After working together for the past 3 years, I know you are a big proponent of the why. What is the why behind State and Federal Communications Strategic Stakeholder Program?
I'm so glad you asked me that, Joe, because I don't like to go anywhere, do anything without really understanding the why. And I know you've heard me mention this many, many times in our staff meetings. And I've said this, and I'm a firm believer that the why behind an action is fundamental. You have to understand your purpose or your belief for what or why you choose to do something. Now, once the why is agreed upon, the possibility for long-term success is so much more likely. And I believe if we can't articulate the why, we shouldn't proceed until we can. So I want to talk a little bit about the why for state and federal communications as it relates to stakeholders. It probably isn't a surprise that our interest here at State and Federal Communications closely aligns with the interest of many of our GR colleagues, some of whom are valued clients and potential clients. And I've learned over time that an important component of most GR programs is strategic participation in stakeholder groups. And I learned this running state government relations programs for a number of big companies over time. I find that these engagements are key to bringing people together to understand each other's priorities. And even more importantly, in my view, is that it provides an ideal platform for meaningful relationship building. We here at State and Federal Communications pride ourselves on being attuned to our clients' interests and what issues they're working on. So when we join them in the stakeholder arena, it just gives us an additional opportunity for better understanding their issues and concerns, and also allows us to collaborate much more strongly.
For our listeners who may not be familiar with managing a stakeholder program, what are the basics for State and Federal Communications?
Well, our stakeholder program really has 4 essential steps: identify, invest, engage, and then review. First, identify. When I joined State and Federal Communications, as I mentioned about 3 years ago, there was a very strong stakeholder program in place, thanks to our founder and our leader, Elizabeth Bartz. So my initial task was to review the existing program. One area where I thought we could become more engaged was in the local government space, for example, with the mayors and with city council people. The other so-called gap that I found was making sure that we had an appropriate balance among partisan groups. In other words, we weren't putting all our eggs in a Democratic partisan basket or all our eggs in a Republican basket. We wanted to balance that out. So we made those adjustments, which resulted in adding 4 new stakeholder groups to our roster. Second step, invest. We need to determine what level of investment we are going to take with the various groups. Most stakeholder groups offer multiple levels of how to participate, each with a financial commitment and a set of corresponding benefits. When we choose to join a new to us group, we typically will start at the lower financial level, simply to kick the tires, to test the waters. An additional investment consideration is time. Since State and Federal Communications is an all-in type of company, participation in the group's activities is first and foremost. We don't subscribe to paying dues or sponsoring events which allow us to put our names on a list on their websites. No, we believe that we are going to be all in or all out. Third step, engagement. Being a full-fledged participant means we show up, we commit to as many meetings and events as we can possibly take advantage of, and also enjoy all the networking that happens there. We seek not only to participate, but to also serve in various leadership positions within the stakeholder groups. And lastly, we diligently develop strong relationships with the staff because that allows us to provide input and constructive feedback on a regular basis. Finally, and the last step, and very important, is the review. It's crucial as our needs and priorities can change over time. So at the end of each year, we take a hard look at all the groups we've participated with over the last 12 months. We ask ourselves several questions, such as, are we benefiting from this participation? Is our participation helping us to meet our company's goals? Does our commitment, both financial and time, still make sense? In the plainest of terms, and this is something we used to say all the time at EDS, is the juice worth the squeeze? And so in our latest review after 2024, we decided to back away from participation in 3 groups. This exercise, while not always easy, is an important part of maintaining a very healthy stakeholder program.
Of the many stakeholder meetings you attended in 2024, what stands out as the most memorable?
Joe, that's a tough one, and I hope it's not a trick question, but let me take a crack at it. As I look back over the past year, and as you heard me say the other day in a staff meeting when we were doing a bit of a year-end review, I was active in more than 38 events this past year. So needless to say, there were many highlights and memorable moments. But as I look back over it, I have to say, without question, the most memorable to me was a session that happened at the National Governors Association's winter meeting. And this was a discussion between Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor and Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, I have to say that sitting in the audience, I was simply blown away that these 2 sitting Supreme Court justices were even in front of me on a stage. I had never seen or heard of such a thing before. So not only was it a rare experience to get to enjoy these 2 justices in conversation, but the insights they shared about the inner working of the court and how the justices work hard at learning how to work together was simply unbelievably awe-inspiring. So this program was part of the NGA president at that time. It was Utah Governor Spencer Cox. He had a platform which was called Disagree Better, which was a fabulous platform and certainly very timely for where we are. So without a doubt, this was one of the most phenomenal programs I've ever witnessed over my 35 years as government relations professional.
Thank you so much, Jean, for everything you do for state and federal communications. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today and talking to us about stakeholder management.
You're very welcome. Happy to do it.
Thanks for listening to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications. For more news, visit LobbyComply.com. To learn more about how we can guide you along the road to compliance, visit stateandfed.com.